All right, it wasn't a short week, but it's going to be a short video this week, based on the fact that everything I did this week was the same thing I did last week, only on the opposite side of the car, and that involved getting this store skin attached to the car. It took a little longer than the other because this skin needed a lot more work. It was in a rougher shape. It had a lot of little dents all over the panel, so I was busy on the air planishing hammer over here trying to sort out as much as I could on that, get it as straight as possible. Also, there were some repairs that were done in the bottom corners on either side of the skin that were pretty bad. They put a small patch in on both ends, but it basically, any place where it was thin, they just ran a bunch of weld. It was all cobbled up on the backside, so I went ahead and cut out a larger area so that I could fill it all in with sheet metal. But that stuff takes time. And at any rate, the other thing that I had to do was this skin. For some odd reason, somebody had asked me about whether or not reusing these old skins, what would happen to these edges once I bent them out and then tried to bend them over one more time. Well, on the other side, I didn't seem to have a problem. This side here was pretty thin, and it started to delaminate. So as I was folding it, some areas had to be re-welded. And what I ended up doing on both sides of the car, just to be sure that it would hold, because we don't want the door skin flapping off at 100 miles an hour or whatever, is I ran a weld bead all the way down both the front and the rear edges of the door, and then I ground it off to straighten it back out on both the front and the back side over here. That way I know I've got a good decent amount of metal on both the front and the back side of the door, where it folds over here in this area of the seam. At any rate, had to take a little time to sweep up around here. I was starting to trip and fall over everything. I like to clean up every 2 or 3 months, whether I need it or not. So that took a little more time out of the week. So as you can see, I didn't get to repaint this, but I just went over here, and you could see it's all welded up on both ends to try and reinforce that and give it a better chance of staying on there. At any rate, we're going to go forward instead of backwards, as far as we're going to go towards the front of the car and try to establish the actual fender, at least on the driver's side of the car, to start with, before I get involved with the quarter panels. I'd like to move to the quarter panels next, because it's probably the most daunting task that I have, but we want to make sure that visually the rear quarter panel follows with the broadness that we're establishing in the front here. Now, the broadness in the front is totally based on the steer out of the tire and how the interference with the tire will react. So we have to basically start here, establish this fender, so that we can visually make sure that we have the quarter panel broad enough that it looks visually correct as far as the proportions, because we don't want this to look, even though you could bring this out 2 inches and 2 inches, but it might seem, because of the size of this, that visually that this is smaller. It's just an optical illusion, but all of this stuff is optical illusions. You have to deal with what my father used to say was, what good is it if it's level and straight, if it doesn't look good by eye? And that's pretty much what we got going on here. Is we have to kind of look at it and give it what it wants visually, and that involves me starting at the front instead of the back. The other thing I have to do right now is I've got the hood frame back off the car, because I was not very happy with how this hinge point ended up coming out. I mean, it works, but there's very little room. As you can see, I've ground this nut down almost to where it's breaking through to the threads to try to introduce this panel, which is the back of the fender. I don't like that at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this hinge point forward a little bit. So what that means is that I'll be cutting this off more in line with this curve, which that's something I need to do anyway. And trying to bury the fastener through this corner here and into that plate. But in order for me to drop the actual bolt-up point down a little bit so actually it won't interfere. Actually, no, I'm not going to drop it down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the nut on the inboard side of this flange here. Now, it won't interrupt the way the skin looks from the top side, because the skin will cover this, but this nut will be on this side, and there'll be a notch in the actual frame over here so that it'll bolt in from this side over here, thus taking this nut completely out of the equation so that this fender can be blended off of the hood properly without having some sort of a hump or a bump in this area to get up over this nut over here. So that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. I'm just going over that. I'm reestablishing some of these. There's a few asymmetries in this because it was kind of just horsed together in order to get me going and see some relationship points and what kind of problems I was going to have as far as interference underneath the hood. Now I have to go back over it and straighten some of these edges out just a little bit and make sure that everything is good to go there before I reestablish the hinge point. So, like everything else, I wanted to work on the quarter, but we have to work on the fender. But before I can work on the fender, I got to work on the hood. That's typical of what's going on with this type of a project. You kind of have to see all the way things interplay. Anyway, like I said, I'm a little light on content this week, but I appreciate everybody who tunes in every week and is watching, and hopefully next week I'll have something more for you to see. Thanks for watching.